that. And then I think it's helpful to meditate the same amount of time, meaning set like a timer when you meditate. Because if you don't set a timer when we meditate, often one of two things happens. One is that on some days we sit down to meditate and maybe we're agitated, we're irritated, we're just completely distracted. We sit down to meditate, we try and get in the meditation and it's not really working at all. So we try a bit for 5 or 10 minutes and then we go, too difficult, and we stop. That's not a good habit to get into, because not only in meditation but in daily life in general, if whenever things get a little bit difficult we give up, we're never going to progress in anything in our life. So therefore, if we set a timer, then on those days where it's difficult, we're going to persevere until the timer. So that's going to help us to develop perseverance. That's a quality we really need, not only in meditation but in daily life in general, to really persevere in the face of difficulties, because that's actually often the time we most progress, is when we are challenged. Often in our life, if things are going well in our life, we just sort of drift along and we really don't develop as a person. It's often only when we're confronted with a challenge, some difficulty that challenges us, do we actually progress. So similarly in meditation, often the times where we really notice some progress is on following some challenge that we've faced. Then we can really go further in the practice. So that's one thing. The other thing is, if we don't set a timer, another thing that can happen is on other days we're meditating, and on other days maybe it's going quite well. In fact, it's going really well today. I'm really enjoying this. And so what do? We just keep meditating. And we keep meditating until when? Until it's not going so well and we stop. And the thing we remember most about meditation is how it ended. So if we're always ending in frustration and disappointment and so forth, we're going to start to associate meditation with not such good experiences. We're not going to want to meditate again. Whereas if we set a timer and it's going well, and then we stop, that's what we remember, and we'll be enthusiastic to meditate again the following day. So for this reason, to set a timer. And the one we're using in this retreat is an app called Insight Timer. So that's quite a good one. You can program it in many different ways. You can have many different types of bells and so forth. So I particularly like that one. But there are many others, of course. But Insight Timer. Okay, so let's go now back into this practice, focusing on the breath at the entrance of the nostrils. And so again, to talk a little bit more about that, I'd like to go back to Attention and Evolution from Alan Wallace on page 47. He says the following. The Buddha described the practice of mindfulness of breathing with the following analogy. So now he's quoting a teaching from the Buddha, who says, just as in the last month of the hot season, when a mass of dust and dirt has swirled up, a great rain cloud out of season disperses it and quells it on the spot. So too, concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, is peaceful and sublime, an ambrosial dwelling, and it disperses and quells on the spot unwholesome states whenever they arise. And so back to Alan Wallace, he's commenting on that now. He says, this analogy refers to the healing effect of balanced attention. When awareness is brought to rest on a neutral object, such as the breath, immediately every distressing thought disappears, and the mind becomes peaceful, sublime, and happy. These qualities do not arise from the object of awareness, the breath, but from the nature of the mind in a state of balance. This approach to healing the mind is similar to healing the physical body. The Buddha implied in his rain cloud analogy that the mind, like the body, has an innate power to heal itself. By clearly attending to a neutral object with sustained attention, without craving or aversion, we enable the mind to begin its own healing. And that's something that'll become much more evident when tomorrow we look at the Shamatha practice of observing the mind, that certainly has very much a healing effect on the mind, and we'll discuss that a little bit more tomorrow. And then in the next section here, he talks about this thing called biofeedback loop. That this is another unique advantage of using the breath. And you may have noticed this already, that when you're focusing on the sensations of the breath here, and your mind starts to calm down, the breathing becomes more subtle, which means the sensations here become fainter, which forces us to pay closer attention, which can enhance our clarity. But likewise, you may have noticed that when the mind gets a bit agitated, the breathing gets a little bit more coarse, and the sensations here are easier to detect, which helps to avoid getting distracted. So this has this unique biofeedback advantage, and that's what he mentions here in the text. He says, as your mind calms, you may find that your breath becomes subtler, and this results in fainter sensations of breathing. The further you progress in this practice, the subtler the breath becomes. At times it may become so subtle you can't detect it at all. This challenges you to enhance the clarity of attention. In other words, you have to pay closer and closer attention to these sensations in order to stay mentally engaged with the breath. There's a kind of biofeedback process at work here. If your mind becomes distracted and you get caught up in involuntary thoughts, your breathing will become coarser, resulting in stronger sensations, which are easier to detect. But as your mind calms down again, the breathing and the sensations that go with it become finer, and this once again challenges you to heighten the degree of clarity. Mindfulness of breathing has this unique biofeedback advantage. And then he now talks about, and I mentioned this already earlier, but we'll go through it again, is that through doing this shamatha practice, in fact doing any sort of shamatha practice, but particularly the breath practice, when we really start to balance the mind, what you will notice is that subtle energies in your body start to balance. Now they tend to be really out of balance. And in that balancing process, all sorts of physical experiences can occur. And again, as I mentioned earlier, some of them can be very pleasant, some of them strange, some of them even a bit unpleasant, but not to make a big deal out of them, because these are a natural byproduct of balancing the mind. And these experiences, they'll come and they'll go, and not really make a big deal out of them. Because often people make a big deal out of them, particularly, the pleasant ones. When that happens, people go, oh, that's nice, I like that, I want that, and have craving and attachment. And then, of course, they try to recreate that experience, and then, of course, with craving and attachment, that's not possible, and then people just get more and more frustrated. Then our whole practice has gone completely astray. The goal of this practice is not to try and get some blissful sensations in the body. The goal of this practice is to cultivate a calm, clear, focused mind. And also sometimes when some strange or even unpleasant experiences arise in the body, people get caught up in them. They go, oh, what's that? I don't like that. Go away. And so we have some aversion, and then just makes the mind more agitated. So just let them be there, whether they're pleasant, strange, unpleasant, they'll come, they'll go. Keep to the practice. And so this is what he mentions here. He says, various physical sensations may occur in meditation. Sometimes you may feel that your limbs are extremely heavy or thick. Sometimes your body may feel very large, or you may feel that you are floating or levitating. Other sensations such as tingling, vibration, or heat are common. It's very common to have a lot of heat, particularly in the chest area. You may experience telescopic vision, viewing your body as if from a distance. Especially when you meditate many hours a day, you may experience within your body prana or vital energies shifting and releasing pockets of tension. When you engage in mindfulness of breathing, these energies begin to balance and flow naturally. This is a process that takes time, and while the energies redistribute themselves, their movement produces various sensations. Don't be worried about them or make a big deal of them. These are natural consequences of the practice. Okay, 2 more points and we go back to the practice. The practice of shamatha results in an anomalous kind of attention. Normally, when the mind is relaxed, attention is slack, and when attention is aroused, this brings with it a state of tension, a tightening of body and mind. So that's what I already mentioned, that normally we sort of oscillate between these 2 states in daily life. Normally when we're focused, we're tense, and when we're relaxed, we're very dull. Of course, here we're trying to combine those 2, to be completely relaxed and alert at the same time. He goes on, he says, but in this practice, the more you arouse your attention, the more deeply the mind relaxes. There is a relatively egoless quality to shamatha. While other activities that call for a high level of concentration are effortful and often goal-oriented, shamatha entails doing almost nothing. You are passively attending to the sensations of the breath without regulating it in any way. Your ego is mostly taken out of commission as you let your body breathe of its own accord, exerting only a subtle degree of effort to balance your attention when it falls into laxity or excitation. So again, to really emphasize this basis of relaxation, that really having that relaxed body and mind, and there are many layers of relaxation. You know, often when we start this practice and we relax a bit, we go, okay, now I'm really relaxed. And we go into the practice. But then later we work on that and we reach a new level of relaxation and just deeper and deeper and deeper of relaxation. We can never relax too much. Last point, he says, and this is something we just covered now actually, as you advance in the practice, increase the duration of each meditation session and decrease the number of sessions each day. Always go for quality over quantity. So again, quality over quantity, which means for us as beginners, keep the session short. If we want to meditate a longer period of time, then have many short sessions. Break it up into many short sessions. But actually, you know, if we want to go deeper into the practice at some point, again, we'll need to extend the amount of time we meditate. And again, one guide to know when to extend how long to meditate is, again, if our normal experience is at the end of the meditation, our normal experience is, oh, I would have liked to do a little bit more, that's a sign that it's time to increase how long we meditate. But again, don't double the amount of time you meditate, just 3 to 5 minute increments. So always emphasizing quality over quantity. Okay. Actually, there's a couple more points I want to cover and then we'll go to the practice. One of the things we mentioned is in preparing the mind, to bring the mind into the present moment. Because normally we're living in the past and the future. And very common here, when we start the meditation, we're already jumping into the future. In particular, in terms of expectations. In particular, once we've done some meditation a little bit and we've had some sort of experiences, then expectations creep in. You know, my meditation, I think it's going to be as good as last week. In fact, I think it's going to be better this week than last week. In fact, it should be better because I've been putting more effort. So if we come into practice with this idea, we're setting ourselves up for a lot of unnecessary frustration. Because one of the things that often people have, this expectation, is my practice should go like that. Every week it should get a little bit better, like this. I don't know anyone whose practice goes like this. Certainly in the short term, it's a lot of this. So we don't know what our mind is doing from one day to the next. Some days our mind is naturally more quiet and still and focused. On other days it's more active and agitated and distracted. So in the short term we're going to have a lot of ups and downs. So if we're having this expectation that my practice is going to go like this, we're just going to set ourselves up for a lot of frustration. In fact, often I hear people talking amongst themselves who do a bit of meditation, and one person says to the other, "Oh, my meditation, I had a really good meditation today. My mind was really quiet and still and focused." Or another person might say, "Oh, my meditation today was awful. My mind was all over the place." So if this is our idea of good and bad meditation, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Because, again, from one day to the next, our mind is very variable. So it's not so much about what happens to us, but it's how we respond to what happens to us that's important. So a good meditation, actually, is any meditation where we try to follow the instructions as best we can, no matter what happens. That's a good meditation. A bad meditation is when we sit down and we simply let the mind do whatever it wants and we don't try to follow the instructions. So that's the good and bad meditation. Otherwise, if we have this idea, good meditation is when my mind is super focused, again, we're just going to set ourselves up for frustration. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's often when we are faced with difficulties that challenge us that actually we can progress more. And we can use and therefore also, in the short term, a lot of variation. So have a long-term perspective in practice. And we can follow some advice from, again, the great Indian master Shantideva from the 8th century, who says, no matter how difficult something seems, everything with practice becomes easy. And it's the same of everything in our life. If we just keep practicing, it'll become easy. So all we've got to do is just keep practicing, to be patient and have a long-term perspective, and then we will progress. And as we're going to see a little bit later in this chart, we're going to look at in a few days' time in the evening, actually the first sign of progress in this practice is simply noticing how chaotic and out of control our mind really is. Because if we've never meditated, we may have this illusion that, my mind is sort of okay, focusing on the breath, well, that can't be too difficult. I might get a bit distracted, but that doesn't look too difficult. And then, of course, when we sit down and try and focus on the breath, and we're usually distracted within 2 or 3 seconds, and we're distracted for long periods of time, we come back, another 2 or 3 seconds, and off we go again, then often people go, I can't meditate. I just can't meditate. In fact, I think I must be doing something wrong, because before I started meditating, my mind was okay, and it's got worse. My mind has got worse since I've started meditating. No. In fact, your mind has not got worse. In fact, what's happening is we're just now really seeing how chaotic and out of control our mind really is. So actually, this is the first sign of progress in this practice. It's just noticing how chaotic and out of control our mind really is. And all we got to do is, when we get distracted, keep bringing the mind back, bring the mind back, bring the mind back, patiently and happily. Just keep doing that, keep doing that. And then we're going to notice over time, instead of being able to focus for 2 or 3 seconds, we can focus for 5 seconds. Instead of getting distracted for 5 minutes, we get distracted for 2 minutes, and so forth. This will take time. If we do that patiently, like anything in our life, no matter how difficult, if we keep practicing, we'll get better and it'll get easier. So that's all we need to do here, is again have that long-term perspective, keep practicing, and it will improve. So let's do that. Let's practice.
It's also with dullness. It's also with the dullness.
Yeah, of course. I mean, our 2 big habits now is distraction and dullness. So, we focus for a couple of seconds and then we just sort of go half asleep or we get distracted. So same. As always, we begin by preparing the body. So keeping the back nice and straight. And at the same time allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And using the out-breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. And allowing the breathing to flow naturally and effortlessly. And then preparing the mind. So not dwelling in the past, not anticipating the future. In particular, letting go of any expectations for this meditation. Letting go of all of these things. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. And simply becoming aware of the rhythm of the breath. Once again, whilst maintaining that relaxed body and relaxed mind, shift your attention to focus on the sensations of the breath at the entrance of the nostrils.